secular interest. And as regards the nature of the spirit of historical criticism itself and its ultimate development, it is not confined merely to the empirical method of ascertaining whether an event happened or not, but is concerned also with the investigation into the causes of events, the general relations which phenomena of life hold to one another, and in its ultimate development passes into the wider question of the philosophy of history. Now, while the workings of historical criticism in these two spheres of sacred uninspired history are essentially manifestations of the same spirit, yet their methods are so different, the canons of evidence are so entirely separate, and the motives in each case so unconnected, that it will be necessary for a clear estimation of the progress of Greek thought that we should consider these two questions entirely apart from one another. I shall then, in both cases, take the succession of writers in their chronological order as representing the rational order. Not that the succession of time is always the succession of ideas, or that dialectics moves ever in a straight line in which Hegel conceives its advance. In Greek thought, as elsewhere, there are periods of stagnation and apparent retrogression, yet their intellectual developments, not merely in the question of historical criticism, but in their art, their poetry, and their philosophy, seem so essentially normal, so free from all disturbing external influences, so peculiarly rational, that in following in the footsteps of time, we shall really be progressing in the order sanctioned by reason. Chapter 2. At an early period in their intellectual development, the Greeks reached that critical point in the history of every civilized nation when speculative invades the domain of revealed truth, when the spiritual ideas of the people can no longer be satisfied by the lower, material conceptions of their inspired writers, and when men find it impossible to pour the new wine of free thought into the old bottles of a narrow and trammeling creed. From their Aryan ancestors they had received the fatal legacy of a mythology stained with immoral and monstrous stories, which strove to hide the rational order of nature in a chaos of miracles, and to mar by imputed wickedness the perfection of God's nature. A very shirt of Nessos, in which the Heracles of rationalism barely escaped annihilation. Now, while undoubtedly the speculation of Thales and the alluring analogies of law and order afforded by physical science were most important forces in encouraging the rise of the spirit of skepticism, yet it was on its ethical side that the Greek mythology was chiefly open to attack. It is difficult to shake the popular belief in miracles, but no man will admit sin and immorality as attributes of the ideal he worships. So the first symptoms of a new order of thought are shown in the passionate outcries of Xenophanes and Heraclitus against the evil things said by Homer of the sons of God, and the story told by Pythagoras, how that he saw tortured in hell the two founders of Greek theology. We can recognize the rise of the Aufklärung as clearly as we see the Reformation foreshadowed in the Inferno of Dante. Any honest belief, then, in the plain truth of these stories soon succumbed before the destructive effects of a priori ethical criticism of the school. But the Orthodox party, as is its custom, found immediately a convenient shelter under the aegis of the doctrine of metaphors and concealed meanings. To this allegorical school, the tale of the fight around the walls of Troy was a mystery, behind which, as behind a veil, were hidden certain moral and physical truths. The contest between Athena and Ares was that eternal contest between rational thought and the brute force of ignorance. The arrows which rattled in the quiver of the far darter were no longer the instruments of vengeance shot from the golden bow of the child of God, but the common rays of the sun, which was itself nothing but a mere inert mass of burning metal. Modern investigation, with the ruthlessness of Philistine analysis, has ultimately brought Helen of Troy down to a symbol of the dawn.